Okay. So my name is Suzanne Grossman. For those of you who don't know me, I think I know a lot of you. I'm Deputy Director of Career Services for the Marxe School, Public and International Affairs. I'm also here with team member Marnie Smith, who can wave to everyone. Some of you know us. And we're very happy to have Yanika Daniels here today to lead us through this workshop. She is a coach with Careers for Social Impact. She's based in the Atlanta area, and she's going to tell you a little bit about herself. But we're happy to have her today and thank her very much for doing this presentation just for Marxe students and alumni. And we will do questions at the end. So at the end, if you want to speak or put in the chat, either way, unmute yourself at that time. So we'll let you know. If you do have a question that comes up during the presentation, you can also feel free to put it into the chat. Yanika is going to pause at different moments to just check on that. But otherwise, we'll hold most questions till a little bit later. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Yanika Daniels. Thanks, Yanika.
All right. Thank you, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be here. Excited to spend this next hour with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just make sure everyone can see it. All right. There we go. Got thumbs up. Is everybody good to see it? Okay. Thank you. All right. So I'm so excited. Suzanne asked me to come and talk a little bit about just how to kind of rethink your job strategy, what's going on in terms of the pandemic and the impact of it. And I think just before I get started, I just wanted to at least acknowledge, you know, this is a really tough time right now, given the social unrest that we have, given the pandemic, the financial crisis that's happening, unemployment going up. And so I just want to, you know, at least start by acknowledging that it's a rough time, and I know all of us are feeling it in different ways. And so it's okay that even some of your questions might bring up some issues that are currently happening. I think it's really important that throughout this next hour, we focus on the ways in which we can really get strategies together to get the job that we want, to really shift our thinking, to put in some plans. And so that's what I'm going to try to do over the next hour. As Suzanne said, I will pause a little bit throughout. If you have any questions, I think from an engagement perspective, we are going to use the chat function. So you can post your questions there. I'm also going to ask you a few times throughout the presentation to either create an action for yourself and put it in the chat to hold yourself accountable. Sometimes when we actually say we're going to do something out loud, we'll then do it. So there'll be opportunities where I'll just challenge you to really think about, you know, what am I going to do as a next step? So let me go to the next slide here. All right, so by the end of this time, I am hoping you're able to differentiate yourself, really enhance some strategies, come up with a good plan, and then think about your system, who's around you, your network, how you can utilize it to make sure that you get your next job opportunity. Or even if you're thinking about how do I transition to a new job, we'll talk about kind of all of those things. All right, so just a little bit about myself. As Suzanne said, I am with Careers for Social Impact. I am a coach, a career coach. And if I were to, you know, describe myself, this is how my LinkedIn says it. I'm a career coach, a talent strategist, and an education advocate. I really work very hard to help individuals find the job and the career that they want. I work hard to help organizations think about how they can best utilize their talent and develop their people. So we'll talk about kind of your headliner in a little bit, but that's what I do, and that's my headliner. I am based in Atlanta. Erin, who is over Careers for Social Impact, is based in New York, and we have a couple of people in a few different spots. All right, so let's get started. All right, how do you overcome hiring freezes, this rise in unemployment, potentially longer interview processes that are now virtual, there's one answer to that. You have to make things personal. If you don't take anything else away from this, you have to be able to discuss your story, make your resume, your LinkedIn, brand it for you. Make people really see you, because they're going to have a high number of applications they're looking through, right? So you have to be able to personalize your tools, be able to talk about how you can be of value, your strengths. You have to be able to relay that. Think about what you have going on in your life. You have to make a personalized strategy and plan for when you are actually going to look for jobs, reach out to people. These are the pieces that you really have to think about. So I'd love for you guys just in the chat. I won't call anything out, but I mean, what makes you unique or special? I just want you to guys put one word or just type in there what makes you you. What is it? What is that kind of personal theme about you? And you're right, Suzanne, I can't see the chat, but I'm hoping that some things are starting to kind of churn through as you're thinking about, what is it that makes you.
I don't see anything yet. Maybe you could give.
Yeah, I'll give you guys a minute. Keep putting it in, and I'm going to keep moving on.
Okay.
All right, so think about that. So today there's kind of these three areas that I really want to focus on with you guys. And that's really about standing out during a crisis. So the first thing is, really thinking about what's your strategy? What's your plan? How long are you going to, how much time are you going to spend looking for a job, connecting and talking to people? What is your story? Explaining really who you are, the path that you're on, this degree and experience that you have, the career work that you have. What is that story? And then who is a part of your system? Maximizing your network. There might be some pieces in here that you already have. You might say, Yanika, I already have my time allocated to spending on this. I already have someone checking and helping me with this. I can tell you all about myself. So I actually really need to work on using my system, using my network. There might be one particular thing as we go through this that you identify I need to spend a little bit more time on specifically. So we're going to start with your plan. I think one of the things that all of you guys probably know is that finding a job is a job in itself. So it feels like, especially if you're working, if you're in school, it takes on a whole nother kind of life of its own, because you're trying to balance, looking for jobs at the same time you're balancing kids, balancing family, balancing work, balancing what's happening in the world around us. And so there are three things that I want you to specifically focus on: your time, your milestones, and accountability. Think about your work week, or think about your week in itself. And I would really challenge you to block out specific times when you're going to kind of realistically look for jobs and look for opportunities. So, some people might just say, okay, when I get some free time, I'm gonna look. I find it more effective if you actually schedule out that, Saturday mornings are pretty good for me. That's some sacred time for me. And I can actually dedicate 2 hours on Saturday morning to specifically focus on my job search. Or, Tuesday, Thursdays are a little bit better for me in the afternoon. Maybe, the kids are doing something else, or while they're doing some work for themselves, I can actually spend some time doing this if I'm not helping them. So the biggest thing that I find is that people casually handle a job search. And that's why I say finding a job is a job. They kind of approach it like, okay, when I get some time, I'll look. And before you know it, the week has gone by and you haven't spent any time on it. So the first thing is scheduling some time. The second thing is developing some milestones. And so what do you want to do this week? What will it look like in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? So this week, let's plan it out. Are we going to spend 1 hour on searching for jobs? Are we going to spend an hour updating our LinkedIn? So by the end of these 30 days, I've updated my LinkedIn profile. I've updated my resume. I've reached out to 3 or 4 people in my network. Think about, what is it realistic for me to be able to do in 30 days, and stretch yourself a little bit, because a lot of times we so casually move into the job search piece that, by the end of 60 days, we're looking back and feeling fatigued, feeling discouraged, because we're not quite sure if we've made some progress. So the milestones is also a piece of kind of this mindset, right? Of if I have a goal, then as I start to achieve it, even if I don't have my job yet, I know I've been doing these specific actions that are getting me closer. And the last piece I would say is accountability. Who in your network, in your circle, in your family can hold you accountable? Who can you share your goals with, your 90-day plan, your 30-day plan, and they're going to ask you, hey, Rashonda, did you do that? And they're going to kind of hold you accountable. It could be your classmate. It could be, someone at work with you. Who's going to really kind of hold you accountable for those things? All right. So I can't hone in that enough. So a part of the plan is also thinking about, okay, Yanika, you're saying I need a plan. I need to set milestones and goals for 30 days, 60 day, 90 day. I mean, what am I doing? So this is why it's really important. Many of us are doing passive activities, and we're really thinking that that's actively looking for a job. So what are passive activities? Passive things might be, okay, I'm looking at a job search board, I'm applying, and now I'm waiting for them to call me in for an interview, right? So you might spend all of your time doing that, right? Applying, submitting resume, waiting, trying to get an interview. That really should only be maybe about 20% of the actual time you spend on your job plan. You really need to spend more time on active activities, right? So really thinking about, okay, let me identify my target organizations. These are the organizations that I'm going after. Let me think about who in my network can I reach out to and talk to see if they have a connection at that organization, or to learn more. How can I personalize my skills more? How can I develop my interview skills more? These are kind of the active things that really will help you get a job a lot faster than simply applying to job boards. And a majority of people, and some of you might be in this category, think that as long as I'm applying to job boards, right, that's my job search strategy. That's what I'm doing. And it really needs to expand and maybe shift your mindset a little bit to think about, what am I doing and how am I actively spending that time? So I guess if I were to think about it a little bit, like maybe what does that look like? So maybe I've identified that this specific company is somewhere that I want to work. Well, let me now go and follow that company on LinkedIn. Let me now look in LinkedIn and see, is there anybody in my network that actually works at that organization? Let me set up a one-on-one conversation with them. Find out what they know about that organization. If they know anybody in that organization that I can talk to, what do they know about this role? And you'll see that then gets you closer to finding out even if this is the right organization for you. And so I'll stress this a little bit later about your network, but you really want to focus more on these active activities to be able to be a part of your job search. All right, so I'll just pause right there, Suzanne, and see if there's any questions popping up in the chat before I move on.
No questions immediately a couple of responses to your earlier question about what makes people unique. So that was nice.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. All right. So those are really the two components of your plan. Let's move on a little bit and let's talk about just your story and who you are and what makes you unique. This is one of kind of my favorite quotes: to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. So we're going to focus a little bit on, what is your story? Who are you? And there's really a 3-step process to this. And I'll talk in this third step about kind of why this is so important. But I think one of the things that we tend to do in our job search strategy is we might put our resume out there and we leave it up to somebody else to interpret who we are, what are our strengths, right? And so one of the first things that you can do is really understand your strengths. What are the things that you are really good at? And identify and craft a summary of that. Sometimes you'll see in a resume, there'll be like a summary statement. Like, does that statement really tell people this is who I am and these are my strengths? So to identify your strengths, there's kind of 3 things you could do. You can really think about, like, what are the things that I've had the most impact over in the course of my career, in my coursework, in any of my experiences? Where have I had the most impact? Or where do I believe, given my strengths, I will make the most impact? Sometimes people struggle with just kind of thinking back on that. So maybe it's, you need to ask your previous manager, ask your coworkers, a lot of times other people can identify our strengths a lot better than we can. And just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean it's a strength of yours, right? So a lot of us are high performers. I am the type of person that if you give me a task, I'm going to do it just because I want to follow through and finish it. And somebody might say, oh, you're great at that. But I'm like, I just really wanted to finish it. I didn't enjoy it. I don't necessarily think it's my strength. And so with strengths, you want to outline the things you're good at, but also the things that give you energy and you want to continue to do, right? Because a lot of us may find ourselves in a role that we thought, okay, this was my strength, but now it's really draining me, and now I'm looking for something else. Another way to identify your strengths is to use a tool. A lot of places, have maybe required you to look at strength finders or DISC, or there's some free tools outside or online. When I read my strength finders, I thought, are they living with me? This is the best assessment of who I am, and I could not myself articulate that. But using that tool, it was easier for me to really identify my strengths. So one of my top strengths is that individualization is the number one strength of mine. Oh, that's why I like to coach, right? Because I'm really into the individual person, trying to understand them, help them think through, what their goals are and achievements are. So no wonder that's something that I'm good at, but also it gives me a lot of joy. So the first thing is really kind of understanding your strengths. Then you heard me in the beginning talk a little about, well, this is who I am and this is what I do. When you're networking with people, when you're talking to people, that's what they want to know. Like, oh, what are you interested in? Craft your headliner. And it doesn't have to be so specific. I think people get caught up in it being so specific, but who do you want to help and what do you want to do, right? So, I myself help social impact job seekers find jobs. Maybe you're seeking to support higher education organizations become more effective. Maybe you're looking at moving into healthcare and trying to make it more effective, or find strategies or solve problems. Like, what is that headliner, right? Because people are going to want to know, and if you can't clearly articulate it for them, then they're going to articulate it for you, right? How many of us have been in a situation where a manager or boss has said, hey, this is, I think you should do this because you seem like you're really good at that. And you're internally saying, no, that's like the worst thing that I would ever want to do. So really think about, like, how do I craft out that headliner of my story? And so these step 1 and step 2 are really important because it's going to help you with step 3, translating your story through your tools. There are a lot of places that it really makes sense to be able to translate your story out. The first is your resume, right? So sometimes we'll sit there and list our skills. Sometimes you'll see an open summary, a paragraph. You know, does your resume, you know, everyone on this call is really into help and social impact and social, making some type of a difference. Does your resume speak that about you? Even if you're kind of in healthcare or interested in education administration, like, does your resume say that, or does it just kind of list your jobs? So that opening summary, your skill set, the things that you're great at and that you really enjoy, really need to speak to your strengths and your skills. And this is a part of telling your story through your tools. Similar with LinkedIn. Do you have a LinkedIn? Is it updated? And does it really describe in that summary, you know, I'm passionate. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? What are the skills that you have? And because recruiters are looking at that. Recruiters are gonna look at your LinkedIn. They're gonna look at, you know, potentially social media that's out there. In your interviews, usually the first question, it might have various ways that it comes across. So that first is something about, you know, tell me why you're qualified for this role. Tell me about your career journey and why you believe that, you know, this is the right opportunity for you. Every interview is going to start somewhere around that. And you don't want to, you know, I do recruiting and interviewing, and you want to be clear. You want to be succinct with people. This is who I am, especially in these social impact areas. People want to know what drives you. Why are you connected to our mission? Why do you want this particular role? And so that story, those strengths, you got to be able to express those. The last place, and we're going to spend just a little bit of time here. If I were to, you know, really maybe encourage you to practice in one area, it would be here in the STAR stories, because I think one of the ways that you can really practice from an interviewing perspective, or just practice telling your story, is to take some time and go back and think about those areas. Think about the experiences, the work that you've done, and how are you conveying and relaying that information to people. So I pulled just a quick one off the web. These are everywhere. Some of you might already be very familiar with the STAR method. I think one of the things that is really helpful is to think about, how am I describing the experiences that I've had, the accomplishments, and the impact. And you want to put it in a STAR format when you're talking and relaying that to anybody, when you're writing it on your resume. What was that situation that I was in? You know, a little bit of detail and background. What was the specific task that, you know, I was charged to do? What action did I myself take? And what was the result? You know, sometimes on our resumes, we might say, you know, I oversaw a team of 10 people, and that's great. But what about it? What was the situation? What, you know, you oversaw the folks, what were they doing? What did they accomplish? How did you lead them? What was the end result? Really just taking the time to think through that helps you really articulate, okay, not only did I, you know, manage this team of 10 folks, but, you know, maybe the morale was low when I got that team. Maybe I had to build a culture there. Maybe I had to identify for them their strengths and maneuver that for them so that we could get to the end result. We could solve a situation. So I would say that this is probably one of the pieces that you can use anywhere. Thinking about those resume bullets, do those bullets bring out the STAR method? Thinking about how you answer an interview question. Thinking about your cover letter. When you're writing a cover letter, you know, a lot of people talk about, you know, I got this experience here, but what was the result? And that's what they're going to look at to see how does it translate over to me. So I'm going to pause right there just to see if there are any questions that people may have or anything popping up in the chat.
There's one question from Madeline asking, should the summary section of your resume and LinkedIn be different?
Great question. So it can, this is what I would say. A lot of times on your resume, I think the bones of it probably are the same. If there is a specific job that kind of calls, like when you apply to a job, I would always say, look at your resume and make sure that it speaks specifically to that job. Let's not submit the same generic resume to every single role. So in that essence, I would say your summary can tweak a little bit if it shows something more specific to that role, right? If there is something specific about healthcare that you're applying to and you want to call it out in your summary because of that specific job, go ahead and do that. I think the other thing to think about when you are making your resume specific to a particular role, a lot of times in the job description, right, they will say, these are the competencies that we want. These are the qualifications that we want. They'll use these buzzwords, right? They'll talk about management experience or talk about the ability to deal with ambiguity, right? And so on your resume, you might have had a situation where you dealt with a lot of ambiguity and you didn't call it out, right? But you can align it to that job, to the job description. Therefore, when you know what they're looking for now. And so when you're going back to your resume, see if you have a few of those kind of activities and buzz things that they are calling out in the job description. Is that in your resume, right? So I guess the long way of answering your question is I would shoot to make your resume personal to each job that you apply to. And the summary part can be somewhat the same, but I would shift it a little bit on the resume per the job that you're looking for. Thanks, Madeline, for that question.
Just one more question about your thoughts on third person on the LinkedIn summary versus maybe first person for LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I try not to use I so much on LinkedIn. So, but I also would rather just say this is the type of work that I like versus kind of talking about, myself in the third person. That feels a little bit inauthentic. So what I try to think about are, the skill sets and the things that you want to do. So in my LinkedIn, I probably have one or two I's, but you might say, I am passionate about supporting people in the healthcare field, or I am passionate, you can say that. You can also say extremely passionate to support the healthcare field, right? So when you're thinking about it, try not to use I so much, but I would prefer the first over the third person. I would prefer that. All right. So we're going to keep moving. All right. So we've talked a little bit about your plan, getting your plan together. We've talked a little bit about your story, spending some time, making it really personal. Now we're going to jump into your network. So this, I think this one comes from maybe the U.S. Job Report, but there's kind of variation in that 75% number. I've seen it go anywhere from like 65% to 80%. But this is just saying, networking matters. Most people are getting jobs through networking, right? This says 75% of that is obtained through professional networking. Maybe 15% are found potentially directly applying to employers' websites, and then kind of other 10 might be found through things like Indeed or Glassdoor, like these other services that are out there. The percentage is not as important in that 75%, but just knowing it is a big chunk. is three-fourths, almost three-fourths of jobs are found. And so in this time of COVID, that is going to be so important. And, you know, I'll talk in a minute, but I think, you know, some people might be a little bit more timid to reach out, right? Understanding, right? We are in a lot of crises are happening at once. There's intersectionality between them. And so you might feel like, oh, I don't want to bother somebody. I don't want to reach out. I don't want to, you know, move into my network and bother them. You know, let's talk about that, because you won't know unless you ask. So give somebody the opportunity to say, no, I don't have time, or no, it's not a good time. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But the key takeaway here is that networking, it really, really matters, especially now. So I think one of the things that becomes really hard for people sometimes, and even for myself, is to think about, well, who's in my network? Like, you say networking, like, what does that mean? Who's in my network? And I had this conversation with some high schoolers last week about it for the roles for work that they're trying to find. And I also had this conversation for some executives a few weeks back. So it doesn't matter, you know, where you are. We're all at different places in our experience, in our education. This is really personal to think about, like, who are you? And let's create a network with. So things that you might consider, I would say, you know, the action that probably you should take is to, like, at least this week, identify 10 connections that you can reach out to. That might sound like a lot, but I tell you, reach out to 10 and you might get 2 or 3 to come back to you. So what organizations are you a part of? Thinking about that, whether they're professional organizations, whether they're social organizations, religious affiliations, what organizations are you a part of? Think about that, write that down. Who do you know in those organizations? You know, what are the organizations, you know, at your college? What are the things that are opportunities and available to you? Who are the mentors, the faculty members, even your coworkers and your classmates? These folks are in your network, right? And so you might not necessarily think about, okay, well, I don't want to go, you know, talk to a professor about, you know, a job. I don't want to bother them. Why not? They've been in the field for a very long time. They're teaching you about this field. Don't they have some connections? Don't they know people? So even your classmates, some of you guys are already working or have jobs that another classmate might want to work where you're working at. And so who are your mentors or faculty members, your classmates? Previous work experience. You know, I kind of go back and think about, oh man, 10 years ago, there are a bunch of people I worked with that were awesome people that all of a sudden I lost connection with, or we're on LinkedIn, but I haven't had a serious conversation, a 30-minute phone conversation with them in years. And, you know, why not reach out to them? The one that becomes a little tricky, I don't know, maybe for me sometimes it's friends and family, right? So, you know, you might have people in your own household, or people where a spouse may work, or a parent may work, or a cousin that may know someone who's working exactly at a place that you want to work at. So kind of the moral of this is, let's think about who's actually a part of your system. I like to, all of my clients, I do one-on-one coaching, and I really like to give in the first week my clients an assignment of spend an hour and a half on your social media, whether it's LinkedIn or, you know, IG or whatever it is, and actually go to your contacts and take a look at all of those people and at least identify 10. LinkedIn is usually the best one because you can see people's jobs, but identify at least 10 folks from just your LinkedIn that you have not connected with and that could actually help you right now find an opportunity. This is probably the most important piece. Networking is going to be so important right now. All right, I was gonna move on, and then I'll take a few questions just about networking. Okay, so sometimes people want to know then, what is it that, what do I do with my network? What are the things that I'm asking? What are the things that I'm looking for them to support me with? So the biggest thing is that let's have a conversation. Ask someone for 30 minutes of their time. Maybe you're requesting one-on-one meetings with them. Like, hey, let's catch up. Let's catch up over, it's virtual, right? Can we have a virtual coffee chat? Like what's happening with you right now? I'd love to just see your face and talk to you about what's going on. And in those one-on-one meetings, you're wanting to know, maybe it's learning more about their role. Maybe it's, discussing with them what's happening in their profession, and do they know of anybody in this particular area or network, or maybe they're able to identify some opportunities for you. So the biggest way is going through your network and starting to reach out and asking people for these kind of 30-minute one-on-one meetings. You can attend a virtual event, right? And so this is a great one to attend. If you guys don't know each other, everybody that's on here right now, that might be a nice place to start. Make sure everybody that's on this call right now is also part of your LinkedIn. But attend virtual events. Maybe you're trying to expand and meet more people, learn about their work and their organization. I think sometimes people feel like, well, what do I need to talk about in these 30 minutes? What do I need to ask? Like, what's my ask? What do I say? And I would say these always require some type of prep. Think about what you're curious about. Those are the things that really feel authentic and genuine, right? Because no one wants to seem robotic and say, okay, what do you do? This is what I do. Now what? It's really more about, what are you curious about? Well, I'm curious about the work that you're doing. I'm curious about, what's happening with your company right now. I'm curious about, are you guys, shifting and doing layoffs, or are you guys actually seeing an uptick in work? I'm curious that this is the work I want to do. Do you know anybody else who's doing something similar that I could have a chat with? So approach it from that perspective, and I think sometimes it removes the fear that sometimes comes with that. So attend virtual events, request one-on-one meetings, and then, the big thing is to keep your LinkedIn updated. So LinkedIn is always an opportunity to connect. You will see me say this a lot. I don't think I put this slide on here, but there are more recruiters looking for people on LinkedIn than any other social platform. And so you want to just make sure that you're there, that you have a presence. But you also want to be a little bit active, right? So you want to follow the target organizations you're looking to work at. You want to maybe connect with someone in their network. Always send like that personalized. When LinkedIn says connect with somebody, always write a little something. Don't just say, oh, connect. Always write a little something, and people are way more likely to go ahead and accept your connection if you just write something like, oh, I'm interested in your organization, would love to connect with you. So we really want to spend, a good amount of time on developing our system, using our system, and this is really our networking system. All right, I'm gonna pause right there because I see the chat lit up a little bit, so I don't know if there's a question that's.
Not right now. I'm sure people are letting things percolate.
And then let me know if I need to slow down at all, but please let me know. All right. So this is kind of, the big three areas, right? We want you to take away that networking is more important now than ever before. Be clear about your story, get a plan together. These are kind of the three things that are really going to help you. Make sure you have that online presence, be, active online. And so the last thing that I'll talk about is kind of really more of a personal theme, for you yourself as you're thinking about where we are right now with COVID-19, right? So of course, like a lot of times we want to snag that dream job, right? This is the type of job I want. This is the, this is where I want to be. And really think about, do I need to think about, a role for the next year that'll help me develop a skill set? And that's what might be important for me to do right now versus trying to find that company that I can be in for the next 10 years, right? It's a personal decision because I think you go for both. But you really want to think, in this day and time, like there might be a shorter term opportunity. And when I say short term, I don't mean 3 months, 6 months. I mean, like, you're in your mind, you're thinking, I want to be at this company the next 10 years. And really it's like, let's think about the next 2 years, the next 2 years of what might get me the skill set, the experience that I need while we're moving right through this financial crisis and health crisis and social crisis, right? And so that's just something to think about. So the next couple of slides will shift a little bit to just kind of some of the trends and things that we're starting to see. And then I'll wrap these up probably in the next 5 minutes so that we can at least have the last 10 minutes for any questions that are starting to pop up for you guys or anything that, you want to ask that might be a little bit more personal. All right. Oh, for one more thing, in terms of your networking, make sure that these are just a couple of tips. The only thing I'll highlight because you guys can read is cast a wide net. So that idea of like, oh, I don't want to bother somebody. I reached out to 3 people. Cast a wide net, right? Because you really want to reach out to people. You really want to get connected and contact with people about opportunities that are out there. And the other thing, just like, acknowledge what's happening. So instead of saying, oh, I don't want to reach out to somebody because the pandemic is happening, like acknowledge that it's happening. Acknowledge that it's happening. Acknowledge that they might not have time, but if they do, you'd love to have a conversation with them. So instead of putting this in a chat box because we're moving, just think through personally, like who in your network, who's my 10 people, who's one person that I can reach out to. All right, so a couple of things just in terms of LinkedIn. I won't read through these because I'll get to some of the trends, but I put these in here. You can read them. Just a couple of tips, and Suzanne is going to also circulate this deck. I forgot to mention that to you guys. I know some of you guys are feverishly taking notes, but she will circulate this. So the only thing that I would, really say is, make sure you have references endorse you, and add people even if you haven't connected in years, right? Make sure you add them. So she'll go over you can see that a little bit later. One of the slides that Suzanne shared with me earlier was just one specific to the hiring demand in New York City year over year. So last April versus this April. And the area that you can see that's having an uptick is healthcare. So just, if that's your focus, just know that roles are still continually out there for that. And I think we'll be there for a while. So this was the labor statistics. So I just wanted to throw that in there for you guys to see. Some job trends or other areas that I'm starting to see that are also having an uptick because of COVID. So of course, in the healthcare area, of course, contact tracer jobs are out there, but specifically looking at things at the Department of Health, there's a lot more jobs being listed. Health technology, there's opportunities there, biotech. There's also, I've seen an uptick in kind of these nonprofit health insurers, opportunities that are out there, and some smaller companies that are really looking for kind of this positive support and focus in nonprofit areas. From a higher education perspective, there's this big piece around online learning and supporting for higher education. There's also this piece around school administration. And so even though you guys may be focused a little bit more on the secondary and higher education, there are a lot of K-12 organizations looking for people to help them think about that college transition, that transition to college. And that's become really big, especially in the charter sector world. That's really big of like, how do you track that matriculation of students? How do you support students as they get into college? And how do you continue to do that, especially first generation students, students of color? That's a big area. And then also thinking about like communication in these areas of nonprofit organizations, administration, communications, all these pieces are still looking for people. A few other areas that I'll just highlight, just think maybe a little bit differently about maybe consumer products. Consumer products is on a rise, and so maybe it's the ones that have a specific social mission. Logistics is huge right now with our supply chain, but specifically for like environmental products and things that the green pipeline, which is getting attacked now as well. So really thinking about maybe outside the box a little bit about how do I still maybe have this impact, right? And it might be a product or organization I wouldn't necessarily traditionally think about. All right. A couple of job sites, and again, I said this will be circulated. Of course, we're not spending a ton of time, right, on job sites. They are a part of our process. So let's not say they're not, they are, but let's be targeted. There's a couple of them that you may or may not be familiar with. On-Ramps Community Hiring Collective is one. They specialize in education, but right now they are in nonprofits, but right now they are specifically have on their website people who are looking for roles right now, specifically because of COVID. JobScan is also a good website. And then Work for Good is one as well. So those are a few just to kind of think about. And you guys will have these. And then I think given the amount of time we have, I won't spend time on this, just a couple of like small interviewing tips. You guys can see that in the deck that circulates. Susan and I had a good conversation about the last bullet. So here in Atlanta, unlike New York, right, we have like opened up. I'm staying at home, but we are open. And what we are finding is that employers are now, at least here, using the virtual platform mostly for interviewing processes. But when it comes to that final interview, some people really just want to meet you in person. I mean, they don't want to get around it. And so they are potentially asking you to disclose, like, with them, like, have you been around anyone or with COVID? And so just don't be caught off by guard once kind of New York potentially opens back up and the rest of the country fully opens back up, that people will start to have that conversation. So I will pause right there. We have about 10 minutes, I think. And if there are any specific questions, I would love to help you answer those.
Yeah, there's a couple questions in the chat, and then if anybody wants to ask a question by unmuting yourself and asking it, or you're welcome to put questions in the chat, or we'll happily have you unmute and ask your own question. Just need to use the raise your hand function or put it in the chat that you want to ask a question. There was let's see, I'm going to start with a question from Niles. He says, when you personalize your resume to the specific opportunity, it could become somewhat different from what you have on LinkedIn, especially if you're applying to more than one opportunity, and how is that perceived by recruiters? Yeah,
that's a really great question. I think recruiters expect you to personalize it. That they actually, they expect you to personalize your resume. And when it's not personalized, they know it. So it's not that you have to specifically call the company out, like applying specifically for this job. But I do think, it could be as simple as if there are, you might have 4 or 5 bullets specifically from one company that you worked at, 4 things on your resume that you think were like really powerful. And it might be shifting those bullets up to the top in terms of the ones that are really specific to this role, right? You don't necessarily have to change every bullet or do, it's really thinking about, this is the things that they are saying are important to them. How do I pull that up or pull that out? And that might shift a little bit, but it's okay. Recruiters expect that. But then the other piece of that, I think, with LinkedIn is I see sometimes people put bullets on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not a copy for copy of your resume. LinkedIn, it's probably a lot better if you just do like a nice little summary blurb for the jobs that you've had, right? And so if you've had 2 or 3 jobs, you can bullet it out, but I wouldn't make it a copy for your resume. That becomes way too much for people to want to look through. Make a nice summary of like, this is kind of the work that you did and what you accomplished in that role. And that way it's kind of easier on the eye for LinkedIn. LinkedIn should not be a substitute for your resume.
Great. Right, so Navita asks a question, how should you request an informational interview if we don't, or how should we request an informational interview if we don't know anyone at the organization?
Yep, that's a great question. I think, so there are a couple of things that you can do. You can, and this is where LinkedIn comes in handy. You can actually go to LinkedIn and add that company. I would add that company to follow them, and so that you can get kind of updates that come from that company. But then you can also in LinkedIn search, like, who's the HR person? Who's, excuse me, like the HR professional that works at that organization. And I would start there. Like I might start by sending them a message via LinkedIn as an HR representative, and then just simply ask, like, I'm very interested in either this role or interested in learning more about your organization. Like, what's the best way for me to do that? Or can I connect with you, right? And so, and that's kind of the easiest way if you don't know anybody at the organization.
Great. I would also add, I always show people how to use the filter function in LinkedIn, and you can filter by school. And so you put up the company, you put in Baruch, and you see if we have any alumni there, and you kind of go from there. So
Great point.
Rashonda wants to know, interviewers always ask for questions at the end of the interview. Any suggestions on what type of questions leave the best impression?
Great question. And I didn't go over interview tips, but I think that was on my slide. So I will say the curiosity is always what I let lead me. But I think a lot of times we forget that we also are interviewing them. And so think about what's important to you, their culture, the management style, the way that they, conduct performance, how are they responding to social unrest? Like, what are the things that are really important to you to find out from them? And I think that sometimes shows a lot more thoughtfulness in terms of that you're looking for the right fit. And so I would steer a little bit away from so much trying to impress them, but really thinking about, how do I find out what's important for me to understand? Is this the job that I really want, right? Because it is a two-way street.
Any other questions? We're open for questions. I did want to ask, I know you're going to show on the next slide, because I know Careers for Social Impact does some networking events and virtual ones now, and you had one recently. And what have you found?
Yes.
Like, when people are going to these virtual networking events, like, what's the best way for them to make the most of those events?
Yep. So thank you for that. And we actually have one coming up. So we hosted an event maybe a month ago, and I think that's maybe how Susan got connected with us. But usually in those events, if you're on a virtual event, if there are tons of people there, just like right now, you can simply scroll through and see people's names. You can quickly scroll down and I can see Kenya, I can see Audrey, I can see Madeline. You can ask, specifically for a list of attendees. Sometimes people will provide that, sometimes they won't. But I might, right now, write down, Janet Chin's name and go to LinkedIn right after this and add her. And might specifically say in that, hey, I was a part of the webinar and would love to connect with you on, this day. I saw that you attended this webinar as well. So that's one thing. And that's also something that people did at our virtual website, at our virtual happy hour that we had. I had probably about 10 people out of those 80 actually send me a LinkedIn request kind of immediately after that. And I've had conversations with probably 2 of those 10 one-on-one. Another thing that you can do is if they're in specific breakout groups, learn a little bit more of what are you curious about the people that you meet in those breakout groups. So they're giving you a little bit of time to socially connect with a small group. The people that you connect with in a small group, I would go ahead and ask them for like 30 minutes, like, hey guys, after this, I'm gonna send you a chat, something so that we can chat a little bit longer. So you want to take it out of that virtual context, take it then to let me connect with you immediately after, via LinkedIn. And then now let me connect with you kind of on a one-on-one basis. You can also reach out to the event planner and ask them in the meeting, hey, are you going to release a list of people who attended this? Or can you make public like the list of people who attended this, the companies who were here, the organizations? And many people will be open to doing that because it is a virtual type event.
Great, thank you. And I see a lot of people starting to share their LinkedIn.
There you go.
Which is awesome, and I think the kind of thing you need to do, be proactive about. Do you want to share your last slide about careers for social impact?
Sure. So, we have a couple. I put this one in here first because I wasn't sure folks would run out of time. We have a couple of events coming up. In 2 weeks, we have a job strategy boot camp. It's going to be we usually have like an 8-week intensive. Because of COVID-19, we know that people need this more. So we're shrinking it down to about a week. And it is a paid event, but you also can apply for a scholarship for it if financials are an issue. So just wanted to put that out because some people might think, might need to apply for the scholarship, but you might really need this kind of really intensive. All the things that I talked about today, we go super deep into that. The other event that would just be really great for you guys to join is our virtual social impact happy hour. It's on July 16th. Last time we had maybe about 80 or so individuals who are all about social impact jobs. We talked about networking, then we allowed people to get into small groups and just connect and network with each other. So this will circulate later, but to hear about these events or to kind of follow them, you can do a couple of things, either follow from LinkedIn, Facebook, or on our website so that you can find out about that. And then my last slide, which is kind of just quickly what we do, we offer job search strategy support. We do a self-study program. So if you want to go on your own pace and get the curriculum, you can do that. We have the boot camps, and then we also do individual coaching and support. So, and I'll go back a slide just in case you needed to copy that. So, anything else popping up? I think we're at time or over time.
Yeah, just more LinkedIn links, which is great. Thanks so much,
Awesome.
Yanika. This is super helpful. I know Careers for Social Impact is going to be a new resource for a variety of people who attended today, and we're happy to continue promoting your work, and we're so grateful to have you here today. I will email everybody a copy of the slide deck, and thanks again. Please join me in.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, take care, everybody. Be safe, stay well, and keep in touch.